Your dog. Oh no. You're like covered in a cloud of smoke.
Elon Musk's The Boring Company came out with these flamethrowers. I thought that was pretty sweet, handheld flamethrowers. Only problem is they're $500. So I thought, I want one, but what can I do about that? And I thought, I bet you I could make my own for less than $50. Let's see if I can
Flip it.
Might be a little cold in the middle. Tastes right.
Oh, just how I like them. Crunchy.
Alright, here you see my Harbor Freight fare. On the left, I've got the torch. It was $29, but I had a 20% off coupon, so I got it for about, $24, something like that. And then over to the right is a 1 pound propane tank. This one happens to be made by Coleman. Those are about $3.50. So fairly inexpensive. This build was crazy cheap. So you can see how that pipe has a bend in it, a natural curve in it, as well as the handle. I want to bend down as well, right, to make kind of a trigger. So I thought, hey, I've never bent pipe before. I'm going to get a pipe bender from Harbor Freight. It was a $7 special. You'll not be surprised to see how that works out momentarily. It's not good, by the way. So I go about taking this apart. So first things first, take off the little clicker. It's kind of like one of those barbecue pit lighters to start it. If you get that version with the barbecue pit lighter, it costs you an extra $10. But I don't know, just for ease of use, I thought it was worth it. So also the wire for that, guys, held in with heat shrink. So I just peel that off. There's actually a little steel inner tube in there, I guess, that kind of separated the wires for that little barbecue pit clicker away from the pipe. I guess it might get a little bit hot. But the clicker uses just a regular kind of solderless crimp connector that slides on the end of that. So it's easy to pull off, easy to put back on. So now you see my first attempt at straightening out this pipe. So the pipe leading from the handle to the nozzle is actually a steel tube. So it is very hard. I'm putting my butt into it, but I'm just not really moving it. You can see I have my vise clamped down to a IKEA table, and it is wobbly as can be. So I figured, you know what, maybe if I turn this guy sideways, I can use the jaws on the vise to actually straighten the pipe out. Worked a treat. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So after that, open it up. You see it's not perfect, but then again, I'm going to hide all of this. So no big deal. Here's me first attempting to use the pipe bender, and I give it all I can, and I feel it kind of crunching, but nothing's actually happening. So I round to it here in a second. I put the pipe bender in the vise itself. Round two, right? So then I put some weight on it and keep going. Bam. I snapped it. I snapped this cheap pipe bender. It was pretty light, so I don't know, maybe aluminum or just really bad steel. So round two, I put the face of this guy in the vise, and then I push down, give it a really good tug, and then I break the other side of the pipe bender. So round three on this guy, I clamp the hose along with the pipe bender in there. I've got my 9-year-old son on the back end of the table trying to hold it in place, and together we're able to muscle it. As you can see, that table, I'm wrestling that thing. It's dancing the whole time. But eventually it gets there. Using hips, using hands, using everything we possibly can. We end up getting the bend we're looking for on this guy. As you can see, it's not the most beautiful bend. You know what I should have done was taken a piece of spare 2x4 and then just kind of cut a form and then use the jaws to squeeze it together into shape, but live and learn. So I went and I cut a piece of 2x4 down. It's about 1 foot by 2 inches, and I put a little groove in the back. You can see how the pipe kind of sticks through that groove. And I did this as ugly as I possibly could. The idea being I'm going to hide all this anyway. So I then Teflon tape my handle, just to make sure all this stuff is airproof. Most of this has like little rubber grommets and stuff in there. But remember to always turn your threads in the direction that you're actually going to screw your material. Helps keep it from unwinding. So I kind of hand tighten that, and off camera I bolt it down. But then you can see I also kind of spray painted the ends of this wood. I wasn't exactly 100% sure how it was going to all come together. So I thought if any pieces were peeking out, I wanted to hide it as best as possible. So you see me wrestling that guy in there, but he fits fairly well. So now I take this plumber's tape or plumber's strapping. It's basically a piece of steel that's pretty flexible. It's got little perforations all the way around. I put a screw in one side of the wood, and then I manhandle it, pull it really taut around the other side, and then I screw it in. But I screw it in at an angle, kind of like maybe a 15-degree angle away from me. That way it actually pulls the strapping even tighter so that it holds the pipe in really well. And again, all this stuff just needs to stay together, needs to stay solid. It doesn't have to look pretty because we're skinning all of this. So there's the back one going in, and then I will snip it off with my big Weiss shears, and then it was on camera, but I went ahead and edited it out. I plumber strapped the front part as well. You can see how it all kind of fits together, passes the shake test. I can shake, it doesn't move at all. Nice and tight. So just about anybody with any tools can handle this. So next phase, I'm actually going to draw around the outside of this on just a big piece of paper. I get these big rolls from IKEA. They're really nice. But you can get them from the craft store as well. And then once I have the basic shape, I'll start sketching out what I want the outside, kind of the cover of this guy to look like. And it started out with sort of a nice square round, and then I started putting some angles in there. You see, just kind of roughing it out, sketching it. Eventually I come up with a design that's sort of, I don't know, I feel like futuristic, kind of pretty cool. And then once you have it fleshed out the way you like, I come back and I put defined lines using my straight edge, and here I'm using a yardstick. I really like sketching, just about any project I do, especially when you can do it real size. Here, I took that bracket that was holding on the little clicker and I flattened it in the vise, put an extra hole on my drill press, sliding it on, and then I will use it to mount this guy in the back right next to the knob. So since I'm right-handed, since I'm right-handed, my thumb tends to be on the left side, so that way I can turn the gas on and then click it while I'm still holding everything together. But I'm using these extra long screws, that way they go all the way through and across that gap, because I had to cut that little V shape in there. So they actually help pinch the pipe. It squeezes the wood together and pinches the pipe, holds everything even just a little bit tighter, but also it's a good firm base for that. So what I did here is with one sign drawn, it's about a 2-inch gap to go from one side, across that pipe, across the top. So I draw that in, and then I make a line at 1 inch, and then I fold the whole affair in half, and then I crisp up the lines a little bit here in a second. After that, I'm going to grab the scissors and I'm going to cut out the pattern. So this pattern, ultimately, I'm going to transfer this over to EVA foam floor mats. I get these from Harbor Freight. You get like a 4-pack for, I think, $6.50 most of the time. I have some of them that I've really used a lot. You're going to see one here. So it's just beat up, looks awful, and that's the texture I wanted on the outside of this thing. I just want it to look menacing and mangled. So then I just take one of the fine point Sharpies. Love these guys. I keep some of the fat and some of the fine point on my work table, and I use that to trace my pattern. Trace it all out. It may be a little bit hard to see here in a second when I ultimately remove the pattern, but it's all there. You can sort of see it kind of in the left side there. And I'm going to grab my razor knife, just a regular box cutter. I usually change out the blade, so I like a fresh blade when I'm cutting EVA foam. It dulls your blade rather quickly, and so it makes it so much easier. I usually try and cut all the way past my lines too. That's another trick I use. It makes it a little bit simpler. And I've got this light I attach to my drill press that I occasionally use to help me see things a little bit better. But then once you're all done, you should be able to just pop out. And here's me just kind of sort of hand molding it. Now you can use a heat gun to shape your EVA foam, and I've done that successfully many times, but in this instance I was going to end up hot gluing it around the gun, or rather I guess around the flamethrower. It kind of looks like a gun, that's what I think of it as, but it's going to end ultimately shaped like that. So I'm going to start by putting this little piece on the very bottom. You see right there I'm scoring it. Any piece of EVA that I'm going to glue to something, I actually score it. So I put a crisscross pattern. It makes these little openings that glue can really get in and adhere to. So you blop it on there. I use a high temp hot glue gun. I can extrude a lot of glue really fast. Here I'm just trying to decide, do I want the wire on the top, on the bottom? Ultimately, I decided to put it underneath because I still have enough wire length to make it all happen. So tons of glue, especially around the perimeter. And then I slap that piece on and push it down really tight. Next, on the foam, you see I traced out the outline so that I know where to score. Score it up really quick and put glue around the perimeter and then kind of fill in between. And then I just push the stock of the gun on there. Hold it firm for a few seconds just to give the glue a chance to adhere. Now I'm going to move on to the other side, score it up. It's basically rinse and repeat. Only instead of starting on the foam, I'm actually going to put the glue directly on the wood. Always go around the perimeter first and then squiggle in between. Again, just nice firm pressure. There you go. So now what I'm doing is I'm masking it off to paint. Nothing fancy here, just to add a little interest to it, just a little extra decoration. You can see also on the front, the very front underneath the nozzle, and on the very back at some point, already filled in with some extra little bit of foam pieces there just to kind of hide. So I'm glad I did spray paint the wood just a little bit. So you can see right there where I overlap the tape. All I do is I just take the razor knife and trim it. So you don't have to be perfect. You can always come back and just trim with the razor knife. But I'm glad I did put a little paint in there because occasionally you can see between the gaps and hides it well. So you can see the paint job finished. I just speckled, just layers of lots of different colors and then peeled off the tape immediately. Let it dry overnight and then came back. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to mount the tank. I decide since I'm a righty, I'm going to mount it on the right side. That way it's mostly out of the way. And I've got these hose clamps that I just put some gaff tape around. Gaff tape, if you're not familiar with it, it's kind of like duct tape, only it's made to adhere to itself and then come off fairly clean as well as other things. So I was introduced to it when I was working at the FedEx Forum, and I really like this stuff. So I mount where I want these guys. Ultimately, I drilled a little hole through the hose clamps and then screwed them in. You can see there that I've already put the tank in and just tightened it up a little bit. So now I've got to do something with this cord, or rather this hose. It's 5 foot long, and that's way more than I need for this project. So I'm just kind of winding it up and then putting some zip ties on it just to keep it secured in place. There you go. And I end up just putting a whole bunch all the way around to hold it nice and tight. Once I do, come back, snug them up one last time. Then I hit them with the dikes to cut off all the ends. And that's about it. It is almost complete. You can see that's where it's going to mount ultimately. Now there is this little adapter piece. This one right here. Got it from Amazon. And so it adapts a 20-pound standard tank over to one of these little 1-pound tanks. It's the magic piece. And when I screw this in, it makes a little noise, right? You can hear it. I just tighten everything up. Anyway, so now that I got it engaged, just crank it on a little bit until I hear a little bit of propane coming out. Then light it. And dial it in, and then
That maniacal laugh is like, what?
Dude, that was...
should I get something else to burn?
Is that Boston or what, dude?
Should I get something else to burn? We're gonna have to do that at
Can you see him on the camera?
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah. Woo! Them doggos look. And if you get it.
Alright, so just kind of pinch it and then slide it off.
Pinch.
Maybe?
This more similar than just a piece of bread is anyway. Boop.
Nice.
Here you go. Rains, but it'll have to do. You want some hot ketchup as well? It's all warm.